aren't many books I would put on my must-read list, but this is a book where I feel will go on my in your lifetime read this book. It is White Tears, Brown Scars by Ruby Hamad. Ruby Hamad is a journalist in Australia. She's a Middle Eastern woman in Australia. And this book is about feminism and intersectional feminism and how white women have been part of the oppression of women of color historically. And no, this book does not spend the whole time just going there and bashing white women and being like, see, white women are evil, they're evil because they're white. No, this book does not do that. It tells you very succinctly and very profoundly how systems and the treatment of white women in comparison to women of color has led to this dynamic, and how white women, knowingly or unknowingly, are able to use their branch of feminism and the oppression that they may face from white men in this case, and how they can use that against women of color, and the contrasting views of the two groups, either women of color and white women. And this is a great book if you want to truly learn about intersectional feminism. This has definitely been a great way for me to learn more and understand more. The book is powerful and it is really in depth, but it doesn't come across as a book where you're going to struggle reading it. Me as a person, I struggle a lot reading more academic-minded texts / more, literary type texts like educational literature. I struggle with that. But this book wasn't one that I struggled with. I actually got through this fairly confidently, which is something that I do struggle with sometimes. So again, this isn't a hard read at all, as in the subject matter may be hard, but the text itself isn't hard to understand, which is always great when you're trying to learn something new. So I'm not going to really go in depth as to what is in the content of the book, because this is a book where I want you to run to preferably your local independent bookshop and get this book, because I think it is an absolute must read. But I'm just going to break down kind of the arguments and the structure of the book, because it will help you decide how you want to go about reading this book. So about the first third of the book is explaining and demonstrating how and why white women are in this position in society where they are viewed differently and treated differently to women of color. It talks about the European aspect of how they treated men and women specifically of color in history, and how maybe the US aspect of how white women had this power over women of color, whether it be through the slavery era or the Jim Crow era, also for Europe, the early colonial area, or even the late colonial area, and how that still has roots in how we see women of color compared to white women now. Then the second 2/3, or the latter 2/3 even, of the book are really showing you what the consequences of that are, giving you examples of how that happens in real life, how that happens now, whether it be in the workplace, because we all know the stories of how women of color are, especially black women, are perceived as hostile or loud in work environments. It is a very common thing that you see in media, that you see a black woman in a TV show or a movie, they are seen as very loud, very verbose, very in your face. And that's kind of a stereotype that has trickled into the real world, because it's based off of these ideas that they had of women of color, ways to put them down, where they could no longer treat women of color as these seductresses as they were seen by the Europeans in particular, and they can't see them as property, so they see them as these people that are a hindrance to people. That's not really as well worded as Ruby Hamad puts it in her book, but Unfortunately, I am not the author and writer Ruby Hamad is. But you're kind of getting to see the picture of this book is really outlining you how and why these issues are in our society and what their impacts are. It really makes you have to think and make you consider, okay, I have seen that happen. Why does that happen? Why, me as a man of color, I have seen these things, but I've never really thought about it from the lens specifically of intersectional feminism. I've only ever seen it as a race thing. But when you add that other layer of, wait, there's also an aspect of misogyny and patriarchy on top of that, you really understand that more. Again, people may already know this. You may be a woman of color and you understand this. And I, as a man of color, have had to learn this, especially through this book. And now I understand it, obviously not as well as maybe someone who has faced it firsthand, but I as an individual kind of understand it a little bit more. It's, again, the book itself as a text, I have only heard great things about the reading of it. I believe when I picked up this book, 2 or 3 people I know at the same time coincidentally picked up the book at the same time because we were discussing what we're reading, and this book came up on several of our lists. So I think the paperback must have come out in the UK towards the end of last year because 4 or 5 of us all had this book. And the going consensus for this book has been that it is a really great read, really informative. Even if you do know a lot about this subject, unlike myself going into this, it is still a very concise read. It gives you good examples, it gives you good case studies as well, it gives you good history, it gives you quotations, it gives you notes, it gives you literature you can go off and read to accompany your understanding you learn through this book. Again, I just think this is an absolute must read. It should be on your read this book in your lifetime, because it really gives you a good perspective, especially if you do not have that perspective beforehand. So, let me know in the comments down below if you have read this book, what you think of it. What do you think of the arguments in the book? Have you enjoyed the book? Did you give the book to someone else? I know I'm giving my copy to a friend who asked for it because I want them to learn and read about it. If you haven't read the book, let me know in the comments down below if this might have motivated you to get the book, maybe to go off and read it yourself. And thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, share the video, and I hope you read a great book today. And also, my emails keep going off. God, that's so loud.